Next on AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show. Here's Brian O'Neill.
The Congressman Tom Reed weekly press call is today's show. Reed got right to the point. It very quickly came out and said he is against the Ithaca Mayor's proposal to Governor Cuomo to legalize statewide heroin injection centers.
I wanted to put forward my clear position in opposition to these heroin injection sites that are being proposed by what I believe are extremists on the left to try to deal with this opioid situation. Now, obviously, I care deeply for the addicted to heroin and to other drugs, and have demonstrated over the years a commitment with our legislative record in supporting funding for opioid in particular and addressing the opioid epidemic, but to legalize safe injection sites, quote unquote, to me is just an extreme position that is dangerous to our communities, given the nature of what we're talking about, given the response and feedback I've heard from law enforcement officers in regards to creating a culture of attracting those that would push and distribute heroin in these communities where these sites are located. I think that risk is too extreme, and what we should do is focus on where we can agree on addressing the opioid epidemic, and that is to have preventive measures, to have law enforcement involved in this situation, to make sure that treatment resources are available and prioritized when it comes to funding, as well as facilities and providers to deal with addiction in a treatment perspective. I think also making sure that we have access to early education and is important to address this, and using that multi-pronged approach, I think, is the best that can be put forward in order to address the opioid crisis that we're seeing in the district as well as across the country. But for me, having an injection site legalized by the government is just an extreme proposal that puts the communities at risk in which they are located with the drug criminal element that is going to go with that type of environment. And I will tell you that we are dealing with individuals when it comes to the pushers and dealers that have no regard to the safety of our communities, that will do and engage in extreme behavior in order to fill their needs in order to get access to heroin to distribute to those folks that are addicted to it. So I just wanted to be clear, as the debate across the state clearly is ripening as the governor deals with this issue in regards to Cynthia Nixon's support of these legalized injection sites versus, I believe, the governor's silence or opposition to it. But I wanted to go on the record to say I'm clearly opposed to this proposal and believe this is just an extremist type of position, extreme type of position that we should reject and focus more on where we can agree in regards to dealing with this issue. So that being said, just wanted to make sure our record was clear on the matter. Let's open it up to questions.
Brian O'Neill.
Hello, Congressman.
Hey, hello, how are you?
Good. Have you seen the governor's legislation? It's called the Red Flag Bill for taking guns away from students named as potential school shooters. This would be warnings to judges from family, schools, or law enforcement.
I've not seen the exact proposal from the governor, and when we talk about taking away our Second Amendment rights, I would want to make sure that there are due process protection, that there are warrant standards that are met in any proposal that would deal with that type of potential taking of that Second Amendment right away from individuals, including students. That being said, obviously I think there's a lot we can agree upon when it comes to gun violence. Dealing with the shooter, the individual behind the weapon, taking on, like I said repeatedly, mental health issues in our community in a much more aggressive manner, and make sure the resources are there, make sure that we go after the criminals that are using weapons to engage in criminal activity, and those individuals rightfully lose their Second Amendment rights after they've been convicted of those crimes. And so if the proposal by the governor is to just arbitrarily remove weapons and the Second Amendment protections that those individuals possess, we would not be supportive of that effort.
Then we had a follow-up question from Wlea, and it was based on the fact that the governor will often go to bat with Washington and vice versa. Congressman Chris Collins came out against the SAFE Act from Washington. So we asked Congressman Tom Reed if the governor, and the governor acknowledged that he's not expecting this to pass because of the Senate Republicans. We said if the governor goes to an executive order with this, would you do anything legislatively? Reed was a little entertained. I wasn't trying to put him on the spot. Here's his response.
Well, obviously, we've already demonstrated, you had Chris Collins' bill in regards to the SAFE Act that we've been supportive of. But obviously the governor at the state level, I'm very confident that the state Senate would limit and take on any type of executive action at the Albany level that would be appropriate to address any overreach by the governor in his actions. But at the end of the day, rather than focus on the what of gun violence, I would hope we could focus on the why is there gun violence. And if you ask that question, I think that brings people together. I think that unites people, and it allows us to try to identify common ground to move the needle to prevent gun violence in the future. Because if you're just taking on the how, to me, that is that's not going to lead to a place that moves the needle to address the problem.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Dave Raleigh.
Actually, we're going to skip the Dave Raleigh question. That was a local question specific to Chautauqua County. And we have a good question coming up at the end from Jason Jordan, so don't want to miss that. The next question was from Jamestown.
Somebody from WRF80?
Yes, Jason Sample.
Jason Sample, yeah, I was going to say. Jason, what's up?
I wanted to get back to what you opened up with, and I was hoping you could maybe elaborate more on your concerns regarding the crime issue that could be exposed to having these treatment facilities opened or these injection sites opening up. I know of a couple of studies that have shown that they actually level off or even drop in the communities over in Europe and even up in Vancouver, Canada, where this has been done. So I know that the police are obviously concerned. It's their job to be concerned whenever crime is introduced in an area, but oftentimes that's anecdotal. It'd be counterintuitive for them to say otherwise. Are there studies, though, that you are aware of where these injection sites would indeed increase crime and public health issues?
Well, I was looking at the Australia study that showed that the open injection sites did nothing in regards to moving the issue of usage of heroin for folks. And also we have seen from law enforcement reports of additional criminal activity, and I think just common sense speaks to the issue. If you normalize and legalize the injection of the heroin, it begs the question, where is the heroin coming from? And maybe I'm wrong, but my understanding is that the proposals don't include the offering of heroin to the addicts, and maybe that's what they're proposing, is to have heroin provided to the addicts so they could use the heroin under government supervision. That to me is an extremely extreme position to take, but I'll let the proponents of this clarify what they would do in regards to the supply chain for the addicts injecting the heroin. But they're going to have to get that heroin from some places. And I will tell you, I've met with addicts, I've met with families, and they have told me repeatedly that once they become addicted to heroin, they will stop at nothing in order to get that heroin. That includes theft, that includes violence, that includes human trafficking, that includes some very dangerous behavior that they are deploying that no one thought they would be capable of deploying in order to get access to that heroin. And it would just beg the question, when folks are spending thousands of dollars in order to get that next high, where are those dollars going to come from? Where is that heroin going to come from? And so I think common sense tells you that on top of the studies, like that Australia study that showed no movement in the needle, that there is a clear common sense question that needs to be asked. there's going to be some activity associated with this, and highly likely it's going to be criminal activity in order to get the heroin and the money necessary to buy that heroin from the dealers that are pushing it.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Anyone from WSKG?
Yeah, hi, Tom. This is Gabe Altieri. How are you?
Good, Gabe. How are you?
Doing well. Kind of going off of that. So I take that then you don't subscribe to the theory that, opening up these sites and letting users come in with heroin that they assume they already have isn't a way to sort of, for the law enforcement to find out more information about these channels, about where these drugs are coming from.
I don't think it's a secret in our communities where users are using heroin, that they can have access to the addicts in regards to finding where their supply chains are. That's occurring. But from my perspective, to legalize this, and especially if the proponents of this are proposing that they provide the heroin for the addicts, and maybe there's some folks out there doing that. I haven't heard that. But the question of where the heroin is coming from is something that law enforcement is very good at using that tool in order to track down those suppliers and those pushers. So I'm not persuaded by the argument that these injection sites would somehow be a boon to law enforcement in order to do that back channel supply chain type of research. The bigger question that I would offer from an answer from the perspective of the addict is that I'm very interested in answering the question of why is an addict chasing that high? Why is that addict looking for that? And that's where the prevention, the education and awareness, that is why law enforcement and diversionary programs that get people into treatment when they're identified is something I'm very supportive of and have demonstrated with our legislative votes to date, and will continue to support those types of efforts going forward.
I'm curious if you've spoken to anybody in the medical community, whether it be doctors or anybody who've experienced addicts coming into hospitals, and what those conversations have been like.
Sure. No, I have, and obviously my heart and my soul go out to those providers that have seen those deaths from those overdose situations, and I've stood with family members and I've seen that, and we want to make sure that those deaths are recognized and the heartbreak that they bring. And so many medical providers will say, well, this could be good in the sense of they would not have to see an overdose situation. But I understand that, and I'm appreciative of that. But to legalize these injection sites and not deal with other issues that surround them, i.e. the crime and the activity that's going to be caused in order to get the heroin, I think is just not addressing the impact on the community at large, and those that aren't using the heroin to the extent that that should be taken into consideration, I think is the fair and right thing to do. Okay, who do we got next?
Rick Miller.
Good afternoon, Congressman.
Hey, good afternoon, Rick.
I'm wondering if you're hearing any reports from around the district from manufacturers concerned with the steel and aluminum tariffs, for example, and the Canadians and Mexican governments kind of retaliating. Are we on our way to a trade war here? And is that going to hurt people in this district?
No. Well, first of all, any retaliatory tariffs have to go through a process. We have deployed our national security mechanisms, which is recognized under WTO and other provisions as an authority that we have the ability to deploy in order to take on these tariff situations. So any type of unilateral, immediate imposition of tariffs is not something I see occurring in the near future. That being said, obviously this has caused some anxiety and fear from manufacturers and supply chains in regards to aluminum and steel, and we've heard that. But I think there's also recognition that the status quo of trade policy cannot continue with the trade imbalances that we have, and that the unfair practices that we see not only in the present situation, but also in the long term in regards to the relationship with China, which is, to me, the ultimate poster child of unfair practices when it comes to trade that needs to be addressed. We are deploying all tools and new tools in a disruptive manner to take on this issue. And Canada and Mexico happen to be probably the most recent examples of those disruptive tools. And from my perspective, I encourage folks, especially our manufacturers, take a deep breath, watch the actions, look what the administration did with Brazil and South Korea, and continue to put pressure on Canada and Mexico in the short term to stay at the table, negotiate an agreement on this that makes it fair for all sides. And then when we move from Mexico and Canada, we go into another environment, be it with the EU and China and other bilateral positions, that we can then have that united common goal of level and fair trade be deployed in future agreements.
Any particular manufacturers expressing concerns in the district?
There's, you hear concerns from just general manufacturers, small to large, about how this is going to impact their supply chains, and I understand that these supply chains have materialized and been developed over many years, and what you're looking at is a potential disruption in it. We've had representatives from Canada that we met directly with. We've met with the Prime Minister of Canada, for example, directly on the issue of dairy and wine that I brought to his attention in a meeting we had with him, as well as Mexican representatives. But because we're on the committee that sets the trade policy for all of America, and so to limit it to one manufacturer or another is not appropriate. Other than to say they recognize the disruptive nature of this, it's causing them concern, but they also do see that the status quo on trade policy has put them in a very unfair position, and that they're, I think, agree with the sentiment that we need new trade policies that result in a level and even playing field for all of our manufacturers and providers across the spectrums.
But will this make them less competitive?
Oh, well, no, I think in the long term, if you have the ability for an American manufacturer to compete on an even level playing field, they're going to do much better than our competitors, because I believe in America we will win that ability to play on that level playing field. So I think we're looking at a long-term picture. We're looking at the reestablishment of U.S. manufacturing to make it here to sell it around the world, and I think that's where we end up through this entire disruptive new trade policy that's being put forward by the administration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone from WETM?
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, it'll be Jerry Zaremski from the Buffalo News with some free trade questions for the Congressman and some interesting questions from the Evening Tribune's Jason Jordan. Stay with us.
Getting healthy or staying healthy is a year-round focus for many people, so detecting potential health problems early is an important first step. It is estimated that only 1 in 3 adults receive all the recommended health screenings, many of which can detect a health problem before it becomes serious. Take charge of your health today and talk to your doctor about screenings that can help guide you to a healthier life. For more information and videos, visit stjamesmercy.org and click on the link for services and clinics available at St. James Mercy Hospital.
And before we get back to the press call, let's check in with meteorologist Gary Bass. What do we know about today, Gary?
Weather is going to be kind of cloudy at times. This morning sunrise was at 5:34. It'll set at 8:45 this evening. And we'll see at least some sun at times during today, partly sunny to occasionally cloudy skies, though. Temperatures, not too bad for this time of year, about 75 during this afternoon. Any rain showers mainly off to our north. Tonight, some scattered clouds, low temperature mid-50s. Looking good tomorrow, partly sunny, a little bit warmer, 75 to 80 on Friday. And then Friday night, partly cloudy in the 50s. Could be a stray shower on Saturday. That's about the only bad part of the forecast. Clouds and some sun otherwise between 70 and 75. Looks nice into Sunday and Monday, Brian.
It's Newsmaker Show. I'm Brian O'Neill. On today with the Congressman Tom Reed weekly press call. He goes next to Jerry Zaremski from the Buffalo News, who had some free trade questions.
Hey, Tom. How you doing?
Doing well, Jerry. How you doing?
Good, good. Following up on Rick's questions, just a couple of things. I've been surprised that I'm hearing of companies in the Buffalo area, at least, that are actually more concerned with the retaliatory tariffs coming from Mexico than from Canada. I just wanted to see if you were hearing that as well in your district.
There's concern from both ends. Obviously, physically. We're talking Canada trade. It seems to be more logically the place where the concern is. But the supply chains are integrated, and because NAFTA is so long in its existence, any type of change to those NAFTA provisions is concerning to many folks in the district as well as just outside the district, and in the Buffalo area would be an example of that. At the end of the day, though, I think there's recognition that NAFTA needed to be updated, needs to continue to be negotiated, and given the nature of where the administration is in regards to prior negotiations with countries like Brazil, South Korea, I think there's a willingness by the administration to remain at the table, and I just encourage our Canadian and Mexico partners to stay at the table, work through this, engage in tough negotiations, but true negotiations. And if you do that, given our long-standing friendly relationship with Canada and Mexico, I'm very confident we get through this in a way that everybody could lead to what we're trying to achieve, a level, fair playing field for trade.
So are these tariffs at this point in time just a negotiating ploy to pressure Canada and Mexico into a better NAFTA deal, or better bilateral agreements if there is no NAFTA?
I will tell you, not only it's not just about negotiations and leverage. It's about deploying new disruptive tools that have never been deployed before or have not been brought out onto the table in decades. So when you have conversations like tariffs, when you have conversations about maybe it's best to negotiate bilateral agreements with Canada and Mexico separately, it's all about putting pressure on those who are at the negotiation table to say, let's deal with these issues, let's resolve them, and if we can, let's do it in the traditional manner of keeping the Canadian-Mexico-U.S. agreement together and just update this agreement to reflect where we stand today. So it's not necessarily about any type of negotiation tactics. It's about putting pressure, putting the ideas and the concerns out there so that we can truly negotiate with some really long-standing close allies in a way that recognize they have interest, we have interest, and we're willing to get to that 80% declare victory type of level of support and move forward with a NAFTA agreement that works for all countries given the nature of where we stand today.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Jerry.
Jason Jordan.
Hey there, Congressman.
Hello.
So I was hoping to get a little bit of an update on the Dresser-Rand situation over there in Wellsville. I know the Reid Amendment is out there to force a study on national security implications of closing the plant. Mm-hmm. But I talked to Senator Schumer today, and he didn't seem very open to legislation at this point. Have you had any conversations with senators who do favor it?
Yeah, well, it's very disappointing to hear that Senator Schumer would be opposed to that legislation. I think that's a common sense piece of legislation, and given the voices of those folks in Wellsville, I'm surprised that the senator would be opposed to that legislative proposal in the defense authorization bill. But I'll let the senator speak for his rationale as to why he would oppose those voices from Wellsville. From my perspective, it's a common sense request. It's really about national security concern and our men and women that are in military harm's way, and at the same time protecting and respecting that workforce that exists there in Wellsville to make sure that our men and women are put in the best place in regards to their safety and ability to carry out the mission they're assigned to do. But I'm going to continue to push for it. We got other areas that are impacted, and we'll try to find allies wherever we can in order to stand with us to make sure that our national security concerns are always paramount to any other issues that are out there.
All right, I just want to clarify the senator's position. He made it sound like simply doing a study was maybe a 50-50 proposition of keeping jobs there, and that he would want something that goes further and directly mandates the jobs stay.
Well, obviously, that's where the study, in my opinion, would come to that conclusion, and that if obviously there's a national security adverse impact, what we were talking about would prevent that transition from occurring. So I don't know how you would just mandate that without finding that national security implication. But I'm glad to hear your clarification that the senator is not saying no to our amendment, but he wants to work with us in order to strengthen it, and I'm open to that relationship in order to strengthen the provision as he seems fit to carry in the Senate. My hope is, given his position in the Senate, that he uses that authority to put this language together in the format that he so chooses to make sure that Wellsville plant is protected and our men and women from a national security perspective are always taken into consideration when deals like this are coming forward.
All right. In previous conversations, I think you said something about maybe a timeline of having the Senate draft something by later in the summer. Is that still a possibility, do you think?
I believe so. I mean, we're talking about the defense authorization bill, and that needs to be addressed. So that's a reasonable timeline. I hesitate to tell you exactly what the Senate's going to do, given the nature of my experience with the Senate and how that body moves in the process. But now that they're in session in August, that may give them a little bit more time to get this done sooner rather than later. And I think that's a reasonable time frame from my experience to tell you where the Senate will take the defense bill up.
All right. And final question. Can you generally classify what the response has been from company officials when you sort of put it right there in their face that this is something that could be the death knell of the community? Their first and foremost concern, I know, is for their employees, and I hear that loud and clear. But they also do recognize, I think they're very sympathetic, is my personal observation of their position on it. But they've obviously made a business decision to move forward. And what my job is just be a face and a voice that's directly in front of them to say, you are impacting many people, not just your employees, but people of the community that rely upon that operation, and then family members and just folks that so rely upon the productivity of those individuals in their communities, be it the charitable organizations, the local facilities. I can go on and on and on. And that does seem to get some recognition from these officials, and I'm just going to continue to be a voice for that and fight to make sure that they know what they're impacting, and they're impacting real people that I care deeply about. Is the announcement of the addition of jobs at the plant in Wlea a positive indicator for what can happen in Wellsville?
I was very pleased to see the Wlea addition of jobs, and hopefully that's some recognition of Siemens' commitment to our region, to our area, and a continuation of potentially Siemens recognizing that their painted post operation is important to grow and prosper as we deal with the Wellsville situation. So, that is a good sign, and I applaud Siemens for making that decision and recognizing the value of the workforce that is located there in our local communities.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. That wraps it up. Thanks, guys.
And Will there from Congressman Reed's office wrapping things up. It's AM 1480 WLEA Hornell. Thanks for listening. Stay with us for Kill Meat.